Welcome everyone to this ArchiveSpace webinar, introducing the PBSpace plugin. Today's webinar will explore the new PBSpace plugin available via GitHub. This plugin adds new properties and object relationships in the application so that PB core structure, elements, and attributes can be better represented in ArchiveSpace. PB core is a data model for the description of audiovisual content. The WGBH Media Library and Archives developed PBSpace, and the development of PBSpace has been made possible in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities, Exploring the Human Endeavor. The PBSpace plugin was also part of the Association of Moving Image Archivists Conference's Hack Day in 2018. For this webinar, we will hold all questions until the end. If you post a question in the chat during the webinar, it will be read and answered during the Q&A after the presentation. Your microphone and camera were muted when you entered the webinar. We ask that you keep yourselves muted until the Q&A session at the end. Our presenter today is Jason Quorum. Jason is a coder and artist based in Los Angeles, California. After a 10-year career in online communications with organizations like the Biotechnology Industry Organization, the Brookings Institution, and the World Food Program, Jason decided to build cool online tools rather than manage them. Through self-education and a back-end web development course, Jason transitioned to a career in web development and is now a developer with the WGBH Media Library and Archives. At WGBH, Jason works on the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, Open Vault from WGBH, Fix-It Plus, an effort to correct machine-generated transcripts and make them more accessible, as well as a Samvera-based archival management system. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Jessica. And here's my photo, which I apologize is the selfie variety, because as a web developer, we don't get a whole lot of headshots. We're usually behind the scenes. So like Jessica said, we're going to be talking about the PBSpace plugin and how we went about trying to represent PB core in archive space. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to do a little bit of background on PB core, which, as Jessica mentioned, is a catalog standard for describing AV content. And then after we kind of do a little bit of a dive into PB core, just to cover what that is, we're going to jump into the PBSpace plugin and what we've added through the plugin, or what you can add to an ArchiveSpace instance via the plugin. But first, before all of that, I've always wanted to say this, and I don't get much of an opportunity to present or be on television. So what I'm going to say is funding for this webinar was provided by these organizations. So thanks to them for funding PB core in general and the development of the PBSpace plugin. And then, as Jessica mentioned, WGBH is a core contributor to PB core, and we do use PB core in our American Archive of Public Broadcasting instance. So if you have questions about, how does PB core work in a production environment or on a website or anything like that, we could be a resource on how that works. All right, so PB core introduction. A little bit of a caveat here. Again, I'm a web developer. We have metadata people who know this stuff way better than I do. That being said, I've worked with it for a couple of years, so I know a thing or two about it. So hopefully I get everything covered correctly. And then if I don't, I apologize. And then if there's any questions, again, about PB core as a metadata, for controlling or for cataloging purposes, we can point you in the right direction on that. So what is PB core? PB core is a way to organize information about AV content. PB core records can easily be shared, allowing information about media assets and collections to be exchanged between organizations and between systems. The public broadcasting community in the US originally developed PB core so that producers of local stations could better share, manage, and preserve their media. And then since then, a growing number of moving image archives and media organizations, even outside of public broadcasting, have adopted PB core to manage their assets and collections. In addition to WGBH and the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which I may at some point refer to as AAPB, so no confusion there. If I say AAPB, that means American Archive of Public Broadcasting. And some of the other organizations using PB Core include the Louisiana Public Broadcasting, Wisconsin Public Television, and Smithsonian Channel. So here's a way to kind of visualize the PB Core. So what you see is towards the top, or kind of at the biggest scale of things, we have an asset, and an asset with a description document. And an asset is a single piece of content, such as like a program, clip, or episode. And one asset may exist in many different forms. For example, like on DVD or magnetic tape, or VHS, or even digital files. And then each one of those instances is essentially a different instantiation, which you'll see as kind of contained within the asset. And the instantiation is a manifestation of the asset that is embodied in the physical or digital form, such as the tape or video file or audio file. And generally, each of the instantiations contains the same intellectual content. And here are some of the elements that we track on the asset level. Elements essentially are a way to describe and store data in a self-explanatory manner according to a structured vocabulary. So what you'll see here is that we have, asset type, asset date, identifiers, subjects, et cetera, and each of these things kind of describe something at an asset level versus an instantiation level. So there can be multiple instantiations containing that are contained within the same asset. And then at the instantiation level, you'll see we track different data about the instantiations than we do at the asset. So the asset is kind of the way I kind of think about it sometimes, and this could be not slightly correct, but in a broad view, I think it makes sense, is that like the asset is kind of like the intellectual content for the most part. Like that's, what is this thing that we're looking at? And then the instantiation itself is like, the actual thing itself. And like we said, there could be multiple copies of it. So, we have, for instance, with Julia Child's episode, we have, the asset level which describes the episode itself, which, maybe she covered, well, I know she covered French cooking in this episode, let's say, because she covers French cooking in every episode. But say we have a specific episode that's, hey, French cooking. And then all the instantiations would be like a DVD of that, or a VHS of that, or MP3 of this, or, any number of different things can be an instantiation. And then within the instantiation, we also have what are called the essence tracks. And those I kind of think of in terms of, if in a typical piece of AV content, you'll have a video track and an audio track. Each of those would be an essence track within an instantiation. So having this whole metadata standard and this way of tracking our own content and thinking about PB Core and thinking about and looking at looking at archive space, we had to start thinking about how are we going to try to represent, how are we going to map different things from PB Core into archive space. And we'd done some kicking around. I don't even think I wasn't even involved in this, but people people within the media library and archives at GBH had kind of known about ArchiveSpace and knew that it was a system out there that that people using PBCore could also be interested in, but we hadn't done a whole lot of research recently into trying to represent PBCore in ArchiveSpace. So that was what we skipped ahead, sorry. That's kind of how we went into the EMEA Hack Day in 2018. So EMEA is the Association of Moving Image Archivists. I try not to use too many acronyms without explaining them. So what had happened last year was that I actually received a scholarship from EMEA to attend EMEA that year and to participate in their AV Hack Day. And it was like way back in 2014, I think, before I started working at GBH, that there had been an attempt to develop a PBCore plugin for our ArchiveSpace. So we'd kind of taken a look at that, and we thought it was a good effort to revisit. So within my application, we talked about wanting to kind of revive that and use the Hack Day as a way to investigate, what would it take to kind of represent PBCore in ArchiveSpace. And it was actually the idea of my supervisor, Casey Davis Kaufman, who it was really like she had talked about the original EMEA Hack Day attempt and was like, yeah, like she brought it up to me. She's like, would you be interested in working on this? And I was like, yeah, it made sense because I am a Ruby on Rails developer. ArchiveSpace is built primarily using Ruby. So when we got to Hack Day, it kind of made sense for me to be like, okay, I want to learn something new. And here was a whole new system that I could get my feet wet in, using a programming language that I know fairly well. And some of the other reasons we kind of decided to revisit the plugin last year was that PBCore itself had undergone an upgrade to PBCore 2.1. So there was a whole new version of PBCore that we could look at representing an ArchiveSpace. PBCore has been adopted by more archival institutions, which means we need to support more institutions that would like to be using PBCore, and this is one way we could push that or push towards that goal a little bit more. So with that, there was a bit of a, with any kind of new system, the Hack Day stuff was interesting for me because it was like, here I am jumping into a whole new ecosystem. So I was like, how am I going to, how do I do this thing? I remember like day one was like fantastic. I got got ArchiveSpace up and running, and I was like, like this is good, and it was Hack Day, but it's really kind of a hack several days. It's kind of usually how they work, because there's not a whole lot you could, if you're working with something new, not a whole lot you can get done in a day. But I felt good after day one, but then like day two, I hit that pit where it was like, oh man, I have no idea what I'm doing in this ecosystem. I'm like trying to do things that would make sense in, just in Ruby on Rails. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to do this in ArchiveSpace ways. So like the second day I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna have anything for this Hack Day. And like we were presenting the next day. But then I was able to kind of like ramp up enough that I was like, okay, I got the ball rolling. And I was able to actually demo something that was pretty, that was not mind blowing by any means, but it was something, right? And then we found later that we had a little bit more time under the grant to keep development of this thing going. So I was able to take some extra time and actually wrap it up a bit better, and get something out there that that people can actually use. So with that, let's go into a live demo, which nothing ever goes wrong in live demos. So let's roll the dice. All right. So this should look familiar to people who have used ArchiveSpace before. It's just the ArchiveSpace plugin. This is my local environment. I just have it up and running with the PBSpace gem installed and everything, which if there isn't questions about installation, we can get into those later, but I'm not really going to cover how to get it installed in this. I'm just kind of going to walk through what is available. So let's go ahead and log in. All right, we're logged in. It's pretty bare bones, but I have populated it a little bit. So we do have a repo you'll see here. So let's select our repo. And it's still pretty bare bones, but let's take a look. Let's see what we got. Ooh, we got a few things. So we made the decision during the hack day that we were trying to figure out, what was the best thing to map, what we wanted to, what was the best thing that we wanted to map to within ArchiveSpace. We didn't want to make a whole new object within ArchiveSpace. So we decided we were going to focus on getting the digital object set up for PBCore. So you see here, I've created a digital object. So we'll go ahead and go in and edit that. But we'll do a quick side jig here to go over the kind of the first thing that we did on the hack day, which was this, well, kind of simultaneous. So while I was teaching myself and learning about ArchiveSpace, Casey did the work to kind of look at PBCore and see what we could match, what we could map to on the digital object within ArchiveSpace. So she developed this spreadsheet, this Google spreadsheet that different people could contribute to with kind of a mapping, just a whole mapping, what would you say, mapping strategy. So what you'll see here is we have different elements within PBCore and in the intellectual content column here. So we have like asset types and identifiers and titles, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get into more detail on how those get mapped, as well as what we're going to map it to in ArchiveSpace. So this can kind of serve as kind of some guidelines about how to use PBCore within ArchiveSpace's digital objects. So this is, I believe, totally open, and anybody can take a look at this at any point. And we do have links to this from the GitHub repo, as well as a number of other places. And then what we did is we kind of prioritized what we wanted to do at the EMEA hack day. So everything prioritized one. We went ahead and tried to do on the hack day. But then, of course, we had to scale back a bit on that. And what we ended up doing was, I think we pulled back to the point where all of the, I think it was all the number ones are included in the PBSpace gem. So we were able to kind of complete that level 1 work for this release. So kind of walk through that mapping through the some actual content here. So what we have here is a record for this Eyes on the Prize interview that the American Archive of Public Broadcasting has on so you see here's how we presented on the American Archive. The other thing that's handy to know about the American Archive, especially for people interested in PBCore, is that if you add a .pbcore extension to any of our records, you can get that record, that record's PBCore. Oh. So what you'll see here is all of the data that's in that record is contained within this PBCore record, and this is what we use to build our records on the American Archive. So there's a pretty good one-to-one matching. I didn't do all of the instantiations because there's a lot of them. So I did like a sample instantiation from this big list of them that we'll kind of see over in ArchiveSpace. So I'm going to touch on the things that we I'm going to cover the things that we touched with our PBSpace gem as we walk through this record. Some of the first work we did was we added some different digital object types. So the PBSpace plugin will add things, I think it's like program, what was it? Program season maybe. Anyway, we've added a few things to this. Oh, album is definitely, and clip is definitely us too. So we've added a few things to this drop-down list that map to PB Core object types. And then in addition, we've added genres. So let's call this one, we could just add civil rights to this, for instance. And genre is just a text field. A lot of what we did here was instead of making new pick lists, some of these things should probably be pick lists in the future, but we've made them essentially straight text fields for now that you can just enter a value in. But potentially in a second iteration, we might do some more pick listing. And then one of the things that was harder for me to wrap around during Hack Day, and we actually push off till later, we're adding these additional identifiers and additional titles. So these are whole new objects within archive space, and these objects get related to your digital object. What this does is, if you have multiple identifiers, you can add them to your object. So, like for instance, we have in AAPB we have an identifier within the PB core that's a Sony C ID, and this is something that we use so that we know, like within our Sony C instance, which is where we host our videos, like which video is this. So these additional identifiers are ways to just kind of tack on identifiers so you don't have to rely on one identifier to find something or do something with an object. You can find it different ways. You can use the ID in different capacities. And then the same thing with titles. We have so many titles with GBH stuff because we have series titles. So like in this instance, right, like we have Eyes on the Prize, which is a whole series of programs. But then we also have individual titles or individual videos within that series. So like we have this interview with John Lewis. So like we wanted a way that you could have different types of titles with different titles, and this additional titles object helped us achieve that goal. And then we didn't touch anything in file versions or dates. The next thing we hit here is the agent links. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new one here. So we added some additional roles, of which I believe contributor is one, maybe creator. I don't remember which ones exactly, but we added a few more roles. So in this instance, I've set up an example where we're going to add a Foley artist, because that's my favorite kind of contributor. So add a contributor, and then we look for another record within archive space. So we're going to look for a person object. We're going to look for Steven Soundman, who is a Foley artist. For those of you who don't know, a Foley artist is the person that does the sound effects in something. That's why it's one of my favorite favorite things we have at GBH. I always like to look for the Foley artists. So we'll go ahead and add that as an agent link. Oh, we don't want to. Let's do that. So then and then the next, and this is kind of the last major thing that got added, are these instantiations. This is actually most of the work I got done during the AV hack couple of days were these instantiations, because it seemed to kind of be the biggest piece, so I kind of wanted to focus on that. And it allowed me to kind of figure out how to relate new objects to existing objects in archive space and deal with their migrations, etc. So what we did is we mapped a bunch of new instantiation fields onto this instantiation object. So there's a bunch of, so anything that, not anything, but it's, I think it's not anything. Most of what you can track in PB Core on instantiations is held within here. So you see we've added a few different things here. And these, again, are mainly text fields. Some of these could be controlled vocabularies if we wanted. But yeah, for right now, they just kind of take whatever string value you want to send in there. The other decision that we had to make was, here we are, is that if you guys remember the, do I still have it up? I don't. That within each instantiation, we had a number of essence tracks. Originally, the thinking was that we were going to try to associate the essence tracks with the instantiations, but we were kind of doing a double nesting thing that really added to the complexity. And we've done this before in different systems in the past. And what we did is like conflated the instantiations with the essence tracks. So most of the essence track fields are also available at the instantiation level right here. So yeah, so here is everything that we've added to the digital object. So we'll go ahead and save, and hopefully it saves. Cool, we saved. Let's actually just take a look at the view page. So you see, yep, everything looks like it was saved. Yeah, I think we got it. I think we got it all. Oh, wait, genre. Here's a little bit of a bug. That's a good catch. So apparently on the view page, we're not showing the genre. So that's something I need to ticket and add to it. But I believe it's actually getting saved. And we'll see if it's there in the edit form. Oh, geez, it did not get saved. All right, we got a bug on genre. Let me figure that out. The other thing that you'll see that was kind of interesting to dig into is getting to add instantiations and other things over here, right? So like, how do we just add instantiations? Yeah, so you'll see like getting this link to go to, for adding the instantiations here was kind of a big deal. Well, it was hard to do, or at least figure out. Cool. And yeah, so that pretty much covers everything that got added, like it's added via the PBSpace gem. Like I said, it's kind of a first attempt at representing PB Core in archive space. So there's definitely more work to be done on it, more work that could be done on it. And I was glad that I got the chance to do this. So let's go switch back to the slides. Something did go wrong. Genre. Anyway, that's not the worst thing though. That's not the worst thing in the world. We'll fix that. Did we cover? I think we covered everything I wanted to cover. All right. So we're at the questions portion. Well, right here, well, I'll go through these real quick, just for more information on different things. Definitely recommend checking out the pbcore.org website, which has recently been redesigned. I think it looks really cool. It's really usable. I use it often, actually, in my day-to-day work to figure out what different elements are and what you can do with different PB Core elements. So I lived there a lot when we were developing our recent Sambera project. In addition, we're on the PB Core's on Twitter. You can follow PB Core there. And then, like I said, if you have any questions about PB Core or PBSpace in general, there's the email address right there. And then the central repository for PB Core, which kind of explains more about what PB Core is and what's available and everything about it, there's the GitHub repo for PBCore 2.1 right there. And with that, that concludes my presentation. So thanks everybody for showing up.
Thank you, Jason. So we will now move into the question and answer portion. We already have some questions in the chat. Feel free to keep adding those questions to the chat. If you would rather turn your microphone on, that's fine, but I'm gonna go ahead and start moving through the questions that have already been posted. And thank you for putting that. Someone did ask for the link to the GitHub, and that is included. Amy asked, can I bulk import PBCore data via an XLS?
Not at this point. We have not touched export or import anything within the PBSpace gem. We literally just were like, how can we get it in there? So our first focus was like essentially just a manual process of like you'd have to add all the fields yourself. But that would be a great addition to the plugin, would be to be able to import and export PBCore, which is no small feat, as we've learned in a number of different scenarios. And exactly, like I remember, like one of the bigger problems is are you going to get the exact same PBCore in or out as you are putting in, right? Like ordering is not necessarily always preserved as you would like it to be. So there's a lot of, it ended up becoming more difficult than we thought at first. But we've done it in a few different instances, so it's something that could definitely be added to the gem. We'd probably have to make some decisions about how that would work, though.
There's another question about bulk ingesting as well.
Oh yeah.
So that would be wonderful, obviously. And you did mention that this plugin, you called it a first attempt. So, and there's more to do.
Yes.
You see in the Hack Day spreadsheet, you were able to cover all the #1 priorities. But since this is or was a grant funded endeavor, what are their plans for continuing development?
That I don't know at this point. I'm actually not sure what the funding pipeline is looking like for PBCore and tech support for PBCore. Unfortunately, I kind of look at, I'm like, what's the next ticket that I have to work on? So sometimes the grand picture is not something I'm as familiar with. So we'd have to talk to some of the metadata people that I work with to kind of figure out what's going on there. But yeah, I kind of get tunnel focused on build the next thing in the list. So yeah, I'm not too sure on that. But it's definitely a question that we people on my team could answer. There are people on the PBCore team could answer.
Okay. Another question from the chat. Are all of the additional fields searchable, i.e. the additional identifiers and genre field?
Yes, they are part of the indexer. I remember how to get the indexer running on that. It hasn't been extensively tested. I will acknowledge that. But I do believe that they are getting indexed. Yes.
Another question, can you use this on resources, or is this just for digital objects?
Just for digital objects at this point. That's all that we touched with the PBSpace gem. That being said, there's no reason that we couldn't, again, expand this out to other objects. We just wanted to cut our, there's so much to do. We were like, we wanted to focus on one thing. So we focused on the digital object.
I'm sorry, I'm catching up on the chat.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch. Oh man.
Karen has commented, I'll go ahead and say, WGBH currently does not have additional funding to continue development work on PBCore, but if the community would like more, we will go in search of funding. So I think the best thing for us to do as a community is to reach out to PBCore and let everyone know that we are interested.
Perfect, thanks Karen.
Yeah, thanks Karen. Is WGBH the only archives using this plugin at the moment?
Well, and we are only using it in terms of developing it. we have a different well, we've been working on a Samvera-based application for most of our own stuff. So this was more of a let's take a look at archive space and play around with it a little bit and learn about it. So even we are not really using it at this point. It was more of a what you call it, like experimental thing for us.
Do you have plans to implement?
Not at this point.
Casey says, we would love to continue community development of the plugin through the EMEA PB Core Advisory Subcommittee and anyone who is interested in working on it. So there's definitely opportunity for community contribution.
Yeah, and I will say if anybody is involved with EMEA, I learned a lot at our, just being able to attend EMEA last year with the AV Hack Day, attending the committee meeting there taught me a lot about PB Core. And yeah, I highly recommend getting involved with that subcommittee if people think it's a solution for them.
Casey also says we developed the plugin for the community as part of WGBH's stewardship of PB Core.
Yes.
And we do have lots of comments. This is such a great project plugin. Thanks to all at WGBH for developing it. I would be very interested in seeing it continue to get developed. More development would be wonderful.
Yeah, agreed. I had fun working on it.
Plugin is very brand new. We would love feedback from anyone else that decides to use it. So for everyone who is here who does have feedback or would like to get involved, do you recommend contacting the email address that you have provided on the screen?
Yeah, totally do that. Also, if people want to reach out to me, that's also cool. And I can, especially for technical stuff, if there's questions about how to use the plugin or something's not working correctly, which obviously genre wasn't today, I'm the person that would be handling that. So it'd be good to hear any kind of feedback whatsoever. I should have my email address up on here, but I'm sure we can get it out there.
So Karen has commented, we don't currently use archive space, but we pursued this because there was a community need. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments or feedback? Matthew says, great program, thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and thank Jason for being here today. I will stick around for a few minutes, and if anyone has any questions, maybe Jason, you could stick around too.
Yeah, totally.
If there are any last minute people still typing and they weren't able to get their question in. But thank you all for joining us today. Again, thank you to Jason, and we will see you at the next Archive Space webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jessica. It was great.